Do you want your business to grow faster? Are you open to new and out-of-the-box ways to drive revenues and increase value? How do you imagine the most successful entrepreneurs and business leaders double, triple, or expand their businesses tenfold or more? The answer is deals. This is a weekly podcast featuring conversations with business owners, executives, and leaders as we reveal behind-the-scenes details that give you, our listeners, the confidence to pursue your own deal-driven growth. On the show, we discuss a huge variety of deals, everything from large, complex mergers and acquisitions to smaller deals that you can do even without significant capital. My name is Corey Kupfer, and I've been supporting deal-driven growth for businesses for 35 years as a successful entrepreneur, professional negotiator, and attorney. My goal is to help you strategize, plan for, find, and complete deals that will help your company grow faster. Welcome to the Deal Quest podcast. Let's get started. Stephen Rothberg is the founder and chief visionary officer of College Recruiter, which believes that every student and recent graduate deserves a great career. College Recruiter's customers are primarily Fortune 1000 companies, governmental agencies, and other employers who hire at scale, meaning dozens or even hundreds a year. They advertise with College Recruiter their part-time, seasonal, internship, and other entry-level jobs requiring 0 to 3 years experience. Over the years, College Recruiter has helped 5 million candidates find great new careers. Wow, 5 million. That's kind of crazy. That's amazing. Welcome to the show, Stephen. Appreciate having you on.
It's my pleasure, Corey. Great to be with you today.
So, listen, we're going to talk about what College Recruiter does, which between the name and the bio is pretty straightforward, but we'll get into some more details about, who you help, but also what kind of deals you've done to help grow your business. But before I do that, I want to take you back to when you were a little kid growing up, maybe 8, 10, 12 years old. What did you want to be? Because my guess is, owning, founding, and running a college recruiting company probably wasn't it at that age, but you tell me if I'm wrong.
You're sort of wrong, but not all that far off the truth. So funny that you mentioned 10, 12 years of age, because when I was about 10, I was in 5th grade. Grew up in Winnipeg, Canada. And my 5th grade teacher calls my mom up on the phone and asks her to come in for a parent-teacher meeting. Not a regular conference, but a special meeting. That's never good news, right? No teacher ever says, hey, can you come in? I just want to tell you how proud I am of your son. It's like, yeah, no. That's the note that goes home in your backpack. That's not the face-to-face. So my mother goes in, and the teacher who, Mr. Rock, says to her, did you know that your son is selling Jawbreakers, big candy, at school? And it's really not that he's selling it at school that's the problem. It's that he's selling them while I'm trying to teach math. So that's the earliest memory that I have of having the entrepreneur bug. But my dad, who's still alive, was an entrepreneur, and his father before him. And so I think it's broken DNA or something like that.
I love it. It's funny. I was just thinking, I actually recorded another episode this morning with another guest, and he and I actually had the opposite experience where we both were drawn to entrepreneurship from an early age, but had nobody in our family to model after. So, so it's interesting that you did. So, great. So you knew. So it sounds like you were entrepreneurial, but not necessarily thinking you'd be finding jobs.
Right. Yeah, definitely not. I don't think at the age of 10 that I really knew what a college student was.
Right,
but
right. I love it. And one more question. Thinking back, what was your first deal you can remember of any type? Well, it could have been something when you were a kid. It could be something early in your career. Just anything that comes to mind.
Well, I could use the same scenario. So the deal, if you could call it that, was that I discovered, again in 5th grade, that the most popular candy that my friends and I were all after, these big Jawbreakers, those big balls that you put in your mouth, and then you suck on them and they last for a day. You've seen like the Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, they talk about the everlasting gobsuck stoppers or something like that. They were kind of like that. Yep. Anyway, if you purchased them at a retail store, single, they were 25 cents a piece.
Yes.
On the other hand, if you purchase them in a box, like today you'd go to like Costco, Sam's Club, whatever, they were a nickel a piece. So the deal that I had with my mother was that she would go and buy the box
Yeah.
And there'd be, I don't know, 100 of them in there or something. And so I paid her the nickel a piece and sold them to my friends for 25 cents a piece. And the share that my mom got cut in on is that I would let her open the box and take one or two of the gobstoppers if she so desired. And I could tell you every time a shipment came through, it was always a little bit lighter than the full 100 load.
Well, I was going to say she's got to take some sort of commission or vig or whatever, You're only giving her costs back in the nickel. You weren't even giving her any part of the profit. I was going to ask you what she was getting out of it.
To this day, she will laugh about it, and she'd be like, "I have no idea why I drove all over town getting these for you."
I love it. So before we jump into the deal stuff that you've worked on to help grow your business and some things that maybe you're looking at. Obviously, listen, I was joking in the intro, but it's true. One of the great things about your business in the name is that it's very intuitive. It's not one of those ones where you have to figure out, what does College Recruiter do? You get the basics of it at least. But tell me more in detail, really, about the service you provide and who you help and how you do it.
Yeah. So interesting you say that the name is really good. I wouldn't say quite that way, but I think that's what you were thinking, because there are actually two different meanings to College Recruiter, and some of your listeners will probably be scratching their heads right now and thinking I think that
to go to college would be
exactly. They're probably thinking oh well, Corey hit the tequila a little bit early today, but that's exactly right. So if you work as essentially a salesperson for a college or university, they'll call you like an admissions representative, but you're a salesperson. Right. You're trying to convince people to pay money to attend that college or university. Your job title at most schools or many schools is going to be college recruiter. Yeah. If you work for the military or for a large corporation and your job is to hire students and recent graduates, then one of the job titles that you might have is college recruiter. So when I started the product basically took over the company in the mid 90s. They called the product, which was an employment magazine. We called that College Recruiter. And the reason that we used the name College Recruiter was at that time, and this is 25 years ago now, at that time, overwhelmingly, the people in the talent acquisition departments or human resource offices whose job it was to recruit college students for internships, recent grads for entry-level jobs, their job title was College Recruiter. So when we call them on the phone and say, hey, we're calling from College Recruiter, we're using the same words as their job title. And that was just golden. For those people, they absolutely knew what we did. Not so easy to protect intellectual property. It's not a made up name, but it also wasn't that bad. And we did get some trademark protection for a fairly limited use, like in the employment space.
Yeah. And especially after you're using it for long, now that you've been using so many years, it does gain strength.
Yeah.
Because you've established it in commerce. In the beginning, it's harder with a more generic thing. Yeah. So let's break it down. So how how does it work? How do you help folks, right? A lot of people know all these online job boards that, the general interest ones, all the big names, whatever. What, is it just that you're niched, or how else are you different?
Yeah. The best way that I can describe it is for people who know job boards, LinkedIn, Indeed, Monster, Career Builder, etc. We are very much like them, where candidates will come to our site and enter one or more keywords. It might be a job title, it might be your major, something along those lines. And then typically also a location, the location being where they want to work, usually city, state, something along those lines. The difference between
these days that's becoming less relevant, right?
You're ahead of me, buddy. The biggest difference from the candidate perspective when they come to our site versus say Indeed, the biggest difference is that the jobs that they're going to see on Indeed is any kind of job, any years of experience, occupational field, whatever. With us, we are a niche site. So most niche job boards target a particular geographic area. CaliforniaJobs.com, LosAngelesJobs.com, something along those lines. You also get niche sites by occupational field, engineeringjobs.com, retail-jobs.com, something along those lines. We're somewhat unusual, not unique, but we're somewhat unusual in that we kind of are targeting an experience level, people with at least some college education. So the business model is that, and this is overwhelmingly the case with job boards, is that the candidates use the site for free, just like you would use your Sunday newspaper classifieds if you were in 1952.
Right.
And the employers pay to advertise their jobs. Now, one of the things that's different from the way we operate from many other sites is that we use what's called a pay-for-performance model. Employers pay us when we send them candidates. So if a candidate comes to our site, sees a job posting ad, clicks our apply button, and goes over to the employer's site, hopefully to apply, then the employer pays us for that click, the candidate going to the employer's site. The typical, let's call it legacy business model, is more like the newspapers, where it's what's called post and pray. We're going to pay you, the employer pays the job board $200, $300 a month, whether they get no applications or whether they get oodles of fantastic applications.
Right.
So there are definitely different revenue models for different organizations. Another thing that makes this a little bit different, Corey, is that most job boards worldwide only operate in one country. And there are significant complexities when you start going across different borders, different privacy laws, currency, different business practices, et cetera. About a year ago, we went global. And so we have thousands of jobs in dozens of countries. By the end of the year, we're going to have over 100,000 jobs in each of the 15 countries where most people speak English.
Wow. That's a big leap, to make that move. Something else.
Yeah, and I'm the Chief Visionary Officer. That's my official job title, which means that I get to dream up these things and other people get to execute. So I win that one.
Absolutely. I know the feeling. I play a similar role in my businesses, and then and in fact, whenever I go away on some sort of retreat or entrepreneurial whatever, my team's always waiting. Like, what is he going to come back with? This time, and and what I love about my team is a little aside. We'll get back to you, but is that they're not shy. I mean, they're up for it and they're going to implement it, and they're also not shy about explaining to me that. Do you realize there's 16 steps you haven't thought of in manifesting that vision? Okay, but you'll figure them out. Yeah.
Oh, it's interesting that you have the same team as I do.
Well, you need that counterbalance, right? It's like I remember I was at a seminar. Somebody is just an analogy who said, he had gone bankrupt in his first business and he had built his next business to super success. And, the question was, well, what contributed to the bankruptcy in the first business? And he said, well, listen, I made a lot of mistakes on my own, but one of my mistakes was to hire an optimistic CFO. And his view was he and the other management team should be visionaries, but the CFO should be one of those positions where they're providing a counterbalance, like saying, no, we don't have the budget for that, or at least and of course he could always make the decision, but so he said, was he an optimistic CFO? It was like, yeah, sure, go for it.
That I could see in the role of a CFO, and we have one she's an optimistic person, but very much a realist.
Yeah.
And fortunately, we're doing well, so she hasn't had to say this. But a CFO's job is definitely something to the effect of, Corey, that is fantastic. That makes a ton of sense. I totally get where you want to go with this. However, it's going to cost us $150,000 over the next 3 months to do that, and you've got $14.82 in the bank. So let's talk.
Exactly. That's the very political, nice way to say, come back to reality, Mr. Visionary, right? I love it. So let's hop into the deal side, because one of the things that I love is that. Sometimes I've got, and listen, our listeners for the last 3.5 years know this already, but if anybody's new to the podcast, sometimes I have people on that are, very obvious, quote unquote, deal people, the investment banker who's going to talk about how to put together an M&A deal or raise funds for a company or whatever. But then, I like to have a lot of other people that are around it, and certainly the entrepreneurs. And one of the things that I love is, there's no, nobody would knowing your business, that how you've grown, how you've, done it, and whether there's any deals involved. And I love showing that in any industry, in any business, there are ways to grow through deals. So let's talk a little bit about what you have done, in the partnership, strategic alliance kind of, area, which is something I know you've done some stuff on, that in addition to what I'm sure is great organic growth, that has helped you move the company forward.
Yeah. One of the best deals that I helped initiate early on in the business, it was 1998. So we had launched our job board 2 years before, 1996. Yeah. Homegrown technology. The components of it consisted of bubblegum, baling wire, and Band-Aids. And literally, we would get 25 people using our site at any given time, and it would crash. Right. So in 1996, 1997 terms, that wasn't all that bad. It was pretty common. Right. Yeah. But, flash forward to like way out in the future, 1998. It's the same year Google launched, by the way. So we had clearly outgrown our platform, and we did not go out and raise a bunch of investment money. Should have, didn't. And that was a personal choice. My wife and I had a young family. We didn't want to go down that path. In hindsight, there were other options. We didn't know them. We weren't smart enough at the time. Yep. But what we did is that we found a company called Boxwood Technologies. So they still exist, different ownership. Yep. And what Boxwood did at the time is that they provided technology, the job search engine, the resume bank, et cetera, to job boards. And we paid them a monthly fee. The monthly fee that we paid, that included like all the development work, customer service work, then processing credit cards, dealing with customer complaints, everything, $2,000 a month. Ridiculously cheap for what we got. Yep. Shockingly, within a couple of years, they had realized that wasn't a sustainable business model, and that they wanted to, I wouldn't call it pivot, but I would say they got smarter. They were always smart, but they got smarter. Yeah. And they started to realize that they were making a lot more money from some customers and just killing themselves with customers like us. Right. That they were spending most of their time and energy servicing customers like College Recruiter, and almost no time or energy servicing associations. So they had like the American Marketing Association. If you were a member of the AMA, you could log into your account, click careers, go and search for a job, post a resume, whatever. So Boxwood made a couple grand a month from AMA, and probably got 1 or 2 emails a month from those guys. Right. And for us, they got the same couple grand a month and probably had 1 or 2 emails of an hour from us. So, where is their time better spent? So they had, I believe we had like a 1-year agreement with them that would automatically renew each year unless either party notified within 60 days, blah, blah, blah. Typical kind of subscription-based, what we now call subscription-based agreements. Very smart, very low risk, doesn't take much time for either side to just kind of continue if times are good. About halfway into the second year, they came to us. John Bell, who was the CEO, still a good friend of mine today. And he could not have been more cordial and diplomatic, and yet also pretty insistent. Right. Where the message was basically, hey, you guys are a square peg, we're a round hole. Yeah. And as each day and each month go on, it's going to be more and more difficult for us to continue to do business with you. So we have a contract. We will absolutely honor the terms of that contract. But boy, will we make it easy for you to get out of this contract. So there is the door. And we're going to sprinkle rose petals on the floor in front of you so that you can find your way to the door. And we will do everything to facilitate you leaving us as quickly as possible. And it wasn't that we were bad. We weren't paying our bills late or anything like that, but it was just obvious. We were no longer
as their model evolved and matured and developed, and they found out when the market and checked their profitability, you were no longer the right fit for
So it was a great deal for us to go to them. The money was right. And they also provided to us exactly what we needed, which was customer support, technology. It was a real win-win. We fit in at the beginning perfectly with their business model. By the end, perfectly not. And they facilitated our migration from their service, where they were providing all that work, to the next company, which when we went to them had a pretty similar business model. They were called Artemis HR. Mm-hmm. They changed their name to Beyond.com. And then they sold that to Bed Bath & Beyond, and then they became Next, Nexxt.
Oh, so they just sold the URL, not the
and I think I heard it was for something like $6 or $8 million or something like that. Somebody comes to you and they offer you money like that for a URL. You kind of find a way of rebranding your company, which they did.
Right.
The folks at Beyond, somewhat similar to the folks at Boxwood, it was a perfect fit early on. They did a ton of business development work for us also. Our revenues went up like tenfold when we were partnered with them. We focused then on driving candidate traffic. We focused on building our brand. We focused on building relationships with our employer customers. And all the, you could call it hard work, building the technology, handling customer service issues. Website goes down. Who's going to fix it at 2 a.m? Who's going to process all the credit cards? They did all that. And that time, rather than being a flat fee per month, the deal that we negotiated was a straight revenue share. And then there was some upside for them, because as our revenues went up, so did theirs. So it became a real win-win. That deal also was fantastic for a few years until it wasn't.
Before we go to the wasn't part, let me just stop you. So I want to make sure people know what we're talking about. So in both cases, these were situations where these providers provided a technology backbone, or whatever you want to call it, right? On a white label basis, meaning that it was okay. So and I think there's been an episode or two, but probably a while ago, listeners, where we talked a little bit about this concept of white labeling deals, which is where somebody comes in, they have an existing, often it's a tech stack, technology, software, whatever it is, and they provide it to different companies. Sometimes it's interesting. They start out by customizing something for a particular client, and they realize that can be useful for others, and then they sort of create it. And it's a way where the company, that their client, their partner, meaning like the college recruiters, can have their own branding on it or whatever. And it usually somewhere right on the site, it might say powered by, or partnered with, or whatever. They get a little credit somewhere.
Credit/disclosure.
Credits. Exactly. So those are called white labeling deals. So I wanted to just establish both of these were white label deals. But then it sounds like with the second relationship with Beyond, who became what Beyond come?
Next, Nexxt, and they still exist, and they're one of the top job boards in the world.
That they, in addition to having the white label technology and support, they did they did some other things for you that helped you increase your business. Okay.
Yeah, like for example, early on in the relationship with what's now Next. So my wife, who's our CEO, and she owns 51% of the company. I own 49%, right? Yep. Happy wives make for happy lives.
Yep.
She and I flew out
and now it's a women-owned business, which also...
And it is, and it's absolutely legit. She's our CEO. She runs the business. Our leadership team reports to her. So it is truly one of those actually women-owned small businesses. Yeah. But so we flew out to Philadelphia, where Next is office. We had a meeting with their CEO, who's still their CEO, Rich Milgram, super smart guy. We're sitting in his office, and it was maybe 2 months into our partnership. And Rich says, walk me through where you make your money. Like, what are things that work? What are things that don't work? And just like being a great partner, he wanted to learn. Yeah. So showed him one page on our site where, because of our name, as you might remember from the beginning of our conversation, Corey, had two different meanings.
Yes.
So we would have people coming to our site saying, I'm trying to find an MBA school. Can you refer me to an MBA school? And so it's like, this is sucking up a bunch of customer service time. Why don't we build a page on our site that lists a bunch of schools? And then we found out that a lot of these schools would pay you for each lead. So we partnered with some of the schools, and every candidate that we sent to them that would fill in their form, we would get like $20. And that business kind of dried up towards the end of, I think it was like 2008, 2009, something like that. But in any case, before that, it was pretty lucrative. So I showed Rich this page that was basically just a page of links. It was better than that. But at the end of the day, it was a page of links.
Yeah.
And you could see the wheels turning in his head. We'd break for the day. We come back the next morning. It's probably 8:30. We're probably having bagels or something in his office. And he says, let me show you something. And he pulls open his laptop and he goes to College Recruiter and he shows us this school finder page. And I'm thinking it's some demo page. And he's just thinking, oh, this is what we should do. And you type in your name and your email address. And it's like, oh, you want an MBA and this kind of, this facet. Check, hit submit, 6 schools come up. Do you want us to send your information to all 6 schools? You hit yes. Now, instead of 1 lead for $20, it's 6 leads for $20 each. So we went from generating a couple $1,000s a month to about $20,000 a month because of that work that Rich did. And those sorts of partnerships and business development deals that what was beyond what is now Next did really propelled our growth. And so finding the right partner, putting that deal together where it was a real win-win was just absolutely integral to our success.
Let's take a break from the show for a minute so I can invite you to a new way to determine your deal readiness. I created a fast and easy assessment that will determine exactly how deal ready you are. Once you complete the assessment, I use your responses to identify the obstacles that are holding you back from being a deal-driven growth genius. It's as easy as heading to corykupfer.com/assessment. That's corykupfer.com/assessment and filling out a few multiple choice questions. I'll be checking in after the episode to see what your results are. Now back to the show. And then, there's another interesting part of this, which we talk about a lot less that I'd love you to get to. And you alluded on the first one that it was a amicable split. And in fact, it sounded like the CEO of that company, couldn't have handled it better, right? It was very,
right.
And you also were about to, before I sort of backtrack this, talk about that this second relationship with Next came to an end at some point as well. And from what, our little pre-call, I remember you saying is that one also was, amicable. In fact, you use a phrase, which I love, like adults in the room, right? So talk to, because listen, I don't litigate. There's a reason I don't litigate, because I don't like, I like putting deals together and finding ways to make them work and helping companies grow as opposed to fighting over it. Now, I do sometimes negotiate partnership disputes and split ups and that kind of stuff, whatever. So I'm involved with it sometimes. And we all know that many times it doesn't go amicably. And even if there's not litigation or arbitration or whatever, there's grumbling and people are unhappy, right? And whatever. Yeah. So this conversation on how you end a relationship that's no longer working, that had been working for a period of time, is no longer for whatever reason, as adults in the room, is one that I think is so valuable. So how do you do it?
Yeah. So absolutely. Rich and his chief legal officer, who happened to be his wife, but wicked smart attorney, corporate attorney also. Her orientation absolutely was to try to make everybody happy enough that everybody could kind of live to fight another day. Yep. And not spend a whole bunch of money on legal fees and get tied up in a courtroom and depositions, et cetera, until you're all old and gray and grizzly. Which actually kind of am now, but anyway, that's another story for another day. But so what ended up happening was Beyond, which now is Next, went and raised a bunch of venture capital money. Mm-hmm. And that instantly changed their plans, who they wanted to work with, how they wanted to scale, etc. So I never thought that they made a mistake for them. It wasn't at all immoral, illegal, anything like that. But what it did is it did fundamentally change how they wanted to grow their business.
Right.
And that became over time less and less compatible with how we wanted to grow our business. So they got together with us and we agreed that the best thing for both organizations was to part ways as quickly as possible. And it wasn't like, there's a fire and we need to like evacuate the building or anything, but it was, over the next few months, let's amicably separate, work through some of the details, who owns the data, how do we get the data to you, et cetera, et cetera. Now, fortunately, turning back the clock, I'm a fully recovered lawyer. I was smart enough to hire really good legal help to do the deal in the first place. So, when wealthy couples get divorced, if there's a good prenup, makes the divorce pretty easy because you've already agreed, who gets the kids and who gets the dog and who gets the boat and all of that kind of stuff. If you get the dog, you win. If you get the boat, you lose. But that's, whatever. When we went into the deal with Next, they offered us two versions of their contract. One version, I think, was a 2-page, what I would call a service agreement. Mm-hmm. It's kind of similar to if you sign up for music downloads with Apple or something like that. You go and you sign up for an email product. Everything is to the party's benefit. The draft of the agreement, you don't even really read it. You scroll to the bottom, you check a box, you're done. And you have no rights. You have all the obligations and you've got none of the rights. The other agreement that they offered was like 20 pages. And they gave that to me in a Word document. And I gave that to our intellectual property lawyer who redlined the hell out of it. And we worked through all the red lines. And then we had essentially our prenup. So when it came time to part ways, we went back to that document and everything was just ridiculously clear. There were no real disputes because the lawyers had done good lawyering. They had figured out in advance when you guys part ways, it's not if, it's when, who owns the candidate data, who owns the relationship with the customers. If invoices went out before you parted ways and payments came in after, where do those payments go? Do you still owe a revenue share on them? There were lots and lots of details to work through. And I'm smarter than average, but I'm not brilliant. I would not have thought through all of those issues. The lawyers did, both for Next and for College Recruiter. So when it came time to part ways, it's just like, okay, well, let's talk about the payment issue. Well, clause 12E says blah, 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 blah. Do we have any questions? Nope, that's pretty clear. So was there some grumbling? Oh, I'm sure. I remember I had some grumbling because it's like, damn, I wish I hadn't agreed to that. I have to believe that the same thing happened on their end, but it was just plain, very plain language, very easy to understand. And so we were able to part ways pretty well. And I know there have been other job boards that have had somewhat similar partnerships with other organizations, and it's been a nightmare for them to part ways because what one side thinks is absolutely reasonable is absolutely unreasonable to the other side. If you can't agree on how to part ways when you enter into a partnership, good luck when you're leaving that partnership.
Oh, yeah. And that applies to so many, that's why doing shareholders agreements or operating agreements for, multi-owner, companies is so crucial. Clear on your strategic alliance, joint venture agreements, or, so it's great, that second example, that how much headache it saved you by, and listen, a lot of entrepreneurs, whether it's because of speed desires or saving money upfront desires, would have gone with the 2-page contract, and it would have been, a very different experience at the back end.
Yeah, I'll give you a third reason for avoiding those agreements, and that is the reluctance to face reality. that a lot of entrepreneurs don't want to look at the possibility of something potentially going wrong. We tend to be optimists.
Yeah.
And we tend not to want to be realists about the likelihood, the almost certainty that at some point that partnership, that deal is going to come to an end. And we just shoot ourselves in the feet over and over and over again when we do that.
And I like the way you use the word realist to counterbalance optimists as opposed to pessimists, because it's true. I think that's an accurate way to put it. Okay, so after that, what did you end up bringing technology in house, or
Yeah. So we brought it in house. We did it at times with using like some software that we purchased and licensed. In 2014, we built the software from the ground up without buying anything off the shelf. Now, like every other business in the world, we didn't build everything that we own, right? You definitely buy stuff, you license stuff, and there's no doubt that we have the same thing. But basically, almost all of the technology, if you come to our site and you interact with it, we built and own all of that.
Got it. Yeah, I got to the point where that made sense. All right, so let's hit one other. We're coming towards the end here. But let's hit one other topic before I go to my last couple of questions. And that is, for bigger companies, there's always a build buy decision, right?
Yeah.
And often, when they see somebody who is 25 plus years, 30 years, something like that, 25 plus years, around, so obviously, you must do okay in your niche. And I'm, joking by saying okay, to last that long. I've got to imagine that some of the big boys and girls, have said, hey, this is a nice niche. Do we build it or do we buy it? And, I can't imagine you haven't gotten inquiries.
Right. Yeah. No, we have definitely had conversations over the years, including very early on in like 1998. We 2 years after the job board launched, when everybody said, oh, if you have a website, you must be great.
Right.
Here's an offer.
So for years before the bubble, the .com bubble.
Yeah. Like there was, the company that came to us in 1998, our revenues were probably only $300,000 a year or something. And I think the offer was like $3 million in cash.
Right.
And that was and the only reason I get into that example was it was a really good example of what was happening early on in our business. We had two potential kinds of buyers that would come to us. One was that kind. The offer was really nice, and they had absolutely no ability to fund it. Well, that's great. I mean, the last time I walked into a really nice steak restaurant and tried to order a $100 steak and said, hey, I don't have any money, but I'd love to have the steak, they politely declined. And we kind of did the same thing with those buyers.
Right, because the $3 million, it could have been $30 million. It didn't matter if they get.
It could have been $3. I don't think they would have had the money for that.
Right.
We had another one around the same time. It was one of the bombs. For listeners old enough to remember, they were a whole bunch of what we now call pre-revenue companies that on paper they were worth a lot of money. They had little to no revenue and even less of a business plan. And I think it was called like collegesearch.com or something like that. So they claimed that they were worth like, I don't know, $300 million or something. And they probably had $14 in revenue. And they called me up out of the blue. And I think it was like November 20th. I remember it was right before Thanksgiving. And they were like, we looked at your business. We think you're a good fit. If we were to make you an offer, would you be able to close by the end of the year? So like 5 weeks. And we're like, depends on what your offer is. Right. My wife and I own 100%. We don't have any outside shareholders. So if we want to do the deal, we can do the deal. Right. And, yes, there's going to be some due diligence and you're going to want to see some papers and financials and whatever. But how long is that going to take? It's a pretty small business.
Yep.
And so they came up with an offer, and the offer was, again, it was pretty good money. And we were like, well, okay. And then they went radio silent. And so we hear about candidates and employers ghosting each other. Well, they were ghosting. Yeah. And so day after day after day, no response, and was just really, really weird. And it got to be the end of December. It got to be early January. And then they filed for bankruptcy. It's like, that's a good indicator as to why they went away. I would say, Corey, to sort of directly answer your question, I would say that most months we have at least somebody who is kicking the tires. And in our industry, it's not that we have new potential buyers each month, but a lot of these buyers they'll reach out in February and we'll have a couple of conversations, emails, whatever, and that will go on for months and months and months. And we did have an offer and a purchase agreement signed that would have been really nice for us and really nice for the buyer. And we were literally it wasn't quite signed. The terms were all negotiated. There was like 3 or 4 words that needed to be worked through, and then we were going to sign it. And it was like March 8th or 9th, 2020, which was COVID. And it was a big staffing company, and they were worried, justifiably so, that they were going to be going out of business because everything was going into lockdown. So they made the right decision by pulling the plug, and really haven't heard much from them since then. I actually don't even know if they survived COVID or not. A number of staffing companies went under or just aren't at all what they were before COVID. So, my wife and I are in our 50s. And we've always said that we're married to each other. We're not married to the business.
Yeah.
And I hear that from friends of ours who also own their own businesses that have good marriages. They talk about being married to each other, not being married to the business. Anybody who dies at a nice old age and takes their business to the grave with them is really doing a disservice to their family and to their employees and other stakeholders. So, at some point, there'll be an offer and it'll be a win-win, and we'll do the deal. I'm not going to be 94 years old and die and still be running this company. There's for the sake of everybody that we serve, that better not be the case.
Listen, there are some of those people who are going to, no matter what you tell them, they're going to die with their boots on, so to speak, at the desk. But I get it. All right, great. So listen, if people want to find out more, I think obviously it's a great business, serves a very clear targeted niche. Folks, need it. Where can people find out more information about you?
Yeah, they can, if they want to just sort of learn more about the company, collegerecruiter.com, it's a website. We're not hard to find. We're all over social media, LinkedIn, et cetera. If they want to contact me directly, as is the case with probably everybody that you ever interact with professionally, I'm on LinkedIn, Steven, Steven, Rothberg, Rothberg, or they can email me, Steven@collegerecruiter.com.
Great. Excellent. So, Steven, my final question on the podcast is always about my highest value in life, which is freedom. And for me, that means everything from freedom from all people around the world, from oppression to why I haven't had a boss in decades. What does freedom mean to you, and how does it impact your life and business?
Interesting. I think I would define it similarly. I have a hard time thinking of my personal freedom without other people around me also having that. So we've definitely had some really hard financial years. The last few have been really great. Mm-hmm. So currently money isn't an issue. But right. There have been lots of years where it was like, how are you going to buy groceries? And so freedom to be able to pay your bills on time without being up at 3 a.m. stressing about it. That's a big deal. The reality is the vast majority of people in this world do not benefit from that freedom. Yeah. And freedom to be able to enjoy the fruits of our labors. There's way too much bigotry and oppression and just people trying to hold other people down in order to have more power. There's way too much of that in the world. We can look at Ukraine and see that happening right before our eyes, and we can also see that happening with mass shootings and those issues going on. You don't have somebody walking into a supermarket trying to kill every person of color they can, and for any of us to be able to say that we're truly free when that is happening. We shouldn't need to be afraid to go to a school, to go to a grocery store. And that kind of freedom is hard to imagine right now. But I'm hopeful that we're going to get closer to that. Was it what Thomas Jefferson used to talk about, the Declaration of, the pursuit of happiness, right? We don't promise happiness, but we should be able to pursue it. Yeah. And I'm hopeful that we'll be able to get there.
Yeah. Love it. Love that answer. Stephen Rothberg, thank you so much for being a great guest on the DealQuest podcast.
My pleasure, Corey.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of DealQuest, where we help you understand how deal-driven growth can be your ticket to freedom. I want to invite you to a unique way to tap into the wisdom and experience of the DealQuest community. Join the DealQuest Deal Den Zoom calls, a free monthly 90-minute mastermind. In the mastermind, we address all the challenges you may be facing and help support you with the opportunities that may arise in terms of deal-driven growth. You will get input not only from me, but all the members on the call will collaborate and serve each other in a mastermind format. To sign up for the free mastermind, go to www.corykupfer.com/dealden. That's corykupfer.com/dealden. I'll see you there. I'm Corey Kupfer. Until next week, wishing you the freedom and financial prosperity that I know your DealQuest will bring.